Welcome to the ClassCast Podcast, where philosophy, policy, pedagogy, and people come together in honest, purposeful conversations about improving school and education for our students and our communities. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens, an award-winning English teacher, speaker, tutor, and podcast host in Northern Virginia. You can listen and subscribe to the ClassCast Podcast on all major streaming services, on YouTube, and at ClassCastPodcast.com. Ladies and gentlemen, class is in session. Welcome to the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we'll be speaking with Kohila Sivas, the founder of MathCodes and the co-founder of the MathCodes Certification Program. Kohila is working on some really great stuff to help young people improve their math skills, their performance, I guess in school, but math goes so far beyond it, just into all different aspects of life. And I'm interested to hear more about sort of the holistic approach that you take in this work. So Kohila was formerly a classroom teacher and has been working as a private tutor and coach for 22 years, and so has lots of experience. And I think right now is a great time to have this conversation. One, just because our need for students with math skills and STEM skills is at an all-time high, but we're also seeing a lot of people concerned about it, whether it's learning loss or just changes in the way things are being taught in schools. A lot of parents want to know more about what they can do to help their own children, and whether that's through finding a coach or a tutor, or maybe a program where they can do it themselves. I think that's information that people definitely want to have. So Kohila, I really thank you for taking the time to talk today. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about MathCodes just in general? I know this is the program that you founded and you've been working on for a while, and I know a little bit, but I would like to know more. And so for our listeners, what is MathCodes and what are you working on there?
Okay. So MathCodes started off when I was young, in high school, struggling with math. So I was at a point in my life where I was not only struggling in math, but also struggling in life. So what I did is I decided to end my life at that point, and I was survived at the hospital. And right after, going through that experience, something inside of me changed. Before, I would sit in math class or any other class, and I would just give up so easily. But right after that experience, and it truly changed something inside of me. And I also read a quote by Albert Einstein, which read that I'm not that smart. I just stay with the problems longer.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's an intense way to start the story. For you, how much, obviously we want to stay focused on MathCodes. I'm just curious for you, how much of the stress or anxiety or depression that you were experiencing was school related versus family or personal, the rest? Because I have a lot of students who, now that I teach online, I actually have a much higher than normal rate of students who experience anxiety and depression. And one of the reasons they've chosen online is because school is not a place that makes them feel very good and they function better. And so I'm curious, how much of a role did school or your formal education play in your own personal struggles?
I would say the school was about 40% and 60% was life outside of school, which was at home. I had an alcoholic dad and an abuse from another adult. But school, how it affected me was I moved from, Sri Lanka at an age 6, and English wasn't my first language. So when I wasn't perfect at speaking English, I decided to mute myself and just not speak any words. So throughout my whole elementary level, I went without speaking. And nobody caught me, or nobody, saw me as a person to say, why aren't you speaking? Speak up. So until I got into high school, and I had this amazing ESL teacher who started to look at me as a person. And she just said, no, you know how to speak. Stand up and say something. Stand up and say something. And she gave me that confidence. And that's when I started really speaking again. So throughout the elementary, I muted myself because I was afraid of judgment. It's not like anyone told me that I was wrong at it or anything. It was just an internal thing that I did it to myself. Right. And so that I would say that 40% of it, but because what was happening at home, I couldn't focus at school.
Right.
And because I had this background of not making friends and just being isolated in my own world, that's how I decided to end my life, right? Because just felt I was alone.
Yeah. And that's tough too, because you're right. It's like, it's almost like the chicken and the egg, problems at home can lead to problems in school, and then problems in school can just sort of make everything go even worse. My own mother, my mom went to Catholic school, went to private Catholic school. And she doesn't have a single positive story about her entire formal education. She was very quiet. She's really funny, but she was very quiet in school. And she always talks about that, how like basically none of her teachers really ever acknowledged her. And she goes, when you talk about your students, or when somebody posts on social media that you're one of their favorite teachers or something, she goes, you don't understand the joy that brings me. She goes, because that means you're noticing people. And she goes, you don't know what it's like to go through, 13 years of formal education and essentially to never be recognized aside from when they take attendance. And I always think about that, as a teacher and as a tutor, that, it sometimes we shouldn't just worry about what we say to people. Sometimes we need to think carefully about what we don't say. And so not engaging students is sometimes even more damaging than the bad engagement. I think sometimes people get cautious, and it's like, as long as you are friendly and you mean well, you should probably engage with your students as much as you can. Because, leaving the quiet student to be the quiet student is not always the best thing for everybody involved. And that can be tricky. So you took this experience, this sort of transformation for you, that it was high school is when all this happened. So, and then at some point, over the next few years, this transforms you personally. You start to speak up, the way you approach school changes. At what point did you make the decision that you were interested in education, that, maybe you wanted to be a teacher or a tutor or something like that? Like, when did that happen for you?
Yes. So as I was sitting in this math class and reading that quote again and again and again, my pastime activity was just wandering around and pretending to work, right? Because I don't want to be noticed. I had a big time about judgment. People would judge me. And I think a lot of our students feel the same way, right? How can I be invisible in a classroom so that nobody noticed me? And we sit there like that, writing our notes out or looking like you're busy in the textbook.
look busy. Don't make eye contact. Look busy. Yeah.
do anything to not make eye contact. So after reading that and that experience of going to the hospital and surviving that, I decided that when have I ever spend time with anything? I haven't. I always give up so easily, right? Was me at that time. So I decided to spend some time in the math class. Like, I started to actually put some effort. There was a shift in myself. And as I did that day after day after day, I started solving problems. Like, it started to click. Things started to work. And my teacher started to notice. Before, if he even comes close, I would be like, no, I don't need help, right? Now I was open to even more help. So it was just like either the universe or something just came. And it gave me this empowerment when I started solving all these problems. Like, I couldn't solve anything at home or outside of my life, but in the math, when I sat down and started solving problems, everything had answer. I could get answers every time. So I got this inner confidence that I did not ever have in my life. For the first time, it was so strong. When I moved to Canada, I felt vulnerable. There was racism and all the other stuff was happening. I finally knew I could do something. I knew I can do this. So from that moment on, I started to become so involved with math. Like, I could sit for hours and hours and just escape into the world of math. And if my dad's yelling, I wouldn't even hear him, It didn't even bother me. It's your problem. It's not my problem. I got my math.
I've got my own problems over here I'm working on. Yeah. That's amazing. And it's an interesting way to think about it too, because I always think about how you get good at math, and people say like, oh, I'm not a math person. And I mean, and I'll use the phrase, sometimes just so I don't have to explain anything too deeply, but like, there aren't really many math people. Like, you have to grind at it. You just have to work at it, and some people, it might click a little bit faster, but even in those cases, it's usually because the person's doing all the practice. When I hear kids are like, or when I think about myself in school, trying to like, how do I get out of this math homework? Or God, I loved when they assigned, was it the odd number problems? Because at least the answers were in the back of the book, like, oh, thank you. Like, get me through this, And it's not necessarily the right way to approach it, because the way to get good is to just keep doing it. I always compare it to certain sports. Like I used to coach golf and play a lot of golf, and nobody's just good at golf. Like you get good because you play all the time. You have to do it and do it and do it. And that's how math works, right? But I think sometimes people get that feeling that, well, it's not going well, or this isn't exciting and I'm getting some stuff wrong. You have to want to be good at it. I teach 11th and 12th grade English, and I have a lot of, AP and upper level classes, and I tutor a lot of brilliant kids. And, the dirty little secret to all of this is that if they just start reading when they're young, like if their parents read to them and they can learn to read by like first or second grade, like don't wait, like get it early. That's it. Just keep reading. Like you could have the worst English teachers ever, and if you read a lot, in the end, you will be in almost the same place. But you have to do it, right? You have to put in the time and put in the work, and that requires some motivation. For you, you have a lot of internal motivation at that point in your life, right? Like it starts to be something that you want to do, but that's not always the case. And so when we're in the role of teacher or tutor, and again, you're working with private coaching and tutoring, and I do, some of that on the side with a lot of writing work and just English in general. But when we think about how want to say this, like how that motivation comes naturally for some people, and for others, it's a little bit of it's a struggle. How do you treat students who are resistant? When a young person doesn't have the internal motivation, when they're there because it's a last ditch effort to get a skill or pass a test or graduate, or maybe it's the parents have signed the kid up and they're reluctant. How do you address that? Because for you got good at math when you basically wanted to get good at math. What do you do for young people who don't have that drive or don't have that interest?
The reason why they don't have a drive or interest is because math has no meaning. We're asking them to learn something that they're not involved in. Like it's like you learn this, I'll never use it. They never see the relevance to their real world, right? It's almost like it's a punishment. You have to sit and practice for 2 hours for what?
Yeah.
Like you got to give them reasons. Our kids have changed. It's no longer like when I was young or you were young, our parents just says, do your homework. And we don't ask question. Okay, I better do my homework. But now the kid is like, what is the purpose of the homework? Yeah. Why am I doing this? Tell me.
which is tough, because it's the kind of critical thinking that we want young people doing, but it's like, not now, like just do it now.
Right.
Yeah, don't ask those questions. Ask those questions about all the other things. But what's like the, obviously I'm oversimplifying, but kind of what's the fix for that, right? Like, is it about finding word problems or sort of topics and ways to engage sort of a more robust thing? Like I think back myself, I loved when we did word problems. I'm probably exaggerating, but I was by far the best geometry student in my class. I was mediocre at algebra 1, and algebra 2 hit, and I had no idea what was going on. And I didn't have like an intrinsic motivation to do it. But I remember thinking like, this is great. I'm into it because I could see how it applied. I could like reason my way through it. I could draw it out. I could do it. And I got to algebra 2 and I lost all of that. The way it was taught to me, there was no real world connection. And so I was like, I'm just working through these equations on the page, and I didn't see any way to apply it. For me, that probably would make a big difference. Is that a strategy that works for a lot of people, or are there other ways that you can get them to engage with those concepts?
So for me, as I was saying in the classroom, as I started solving those problems, my biggest question during those times, as I discovered and started hacking math, I just love staying with the math problems and figuring things out. I started asking myself, like, why isn't math taught this way? Why am I learning it? Like the teachers who would taught me, it was so complicated. They gave it to me in a complicated format. But when I started hacking, I arrived at the answer in a way simplified way, just reached there. So that's one thing that I share with my students through MathCodes is how simple math is. It's not complicated as you think. It's not going to take that all this time in your life. Let me show you how fast and easy and simplified way you can get to it, and let me make meaning for you. And I also get them to buy into it. There is a reason why you're learning this.
Right.
And let's figure that out. What is that reason?
Yeah.
Why do you think is that? Why do you think you're learning it? And they'll have answer like, because I have to do it.
So I have to do it. Yeah. Because I need a certain GPA to do that, Yeah. And we get a lot of convoluted answers about that, I think, in general. And it's purposeful, but I've had kids who are like, you waste the first like 8 to 10 minutes of every class telling us what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, what I'm doing, I'm telling you why we're doing it. I'm telling you how it connects to everything else that's going on, or I'm telling you how you can apply this outside of class. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so that way the rest of class time, you see a reason for it. If it costs me 8 minutes out of 90 to get you to understand that like there's value here, that's time well spent, because that means you're actually going to try for the rest of it. If we just jump in, I say, hey, do these things, read this thing, whatever, you might play along, but you're not giving me your best effort because you don't see why. And so, I agree. I think that that's a really important thing. And, and maybe it's good that we're making that adjustment. When students say why, we should have a good answer. If a kid says, why am I doing this? And you can't really tell them why, like, you should probably change the plan, that answer needs to be as clear to the teacher as to anyone. So let's hit one of the big questions of the podcast. Just so it sort of lines up nicely. You're saying that students need this sense of purpose. They need to know why they're doing things and how they can apply it. To you, what is the purpose of education? And whether that's in school or through private tutoring and coaching, like what are we trying to do? What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish with young people as we go through the process of formal education?
I don't know if the school system is still, it can deliver the purpose I have in mind, but I'll share with you what I think the system should allow the students to have. They need to provide the students the education that's current, fitting to their current environment and what's happening. We have an outdated system that was developed so long ago, and we're still applying the same way. And students have, like, they're just going to be bored, and they're not finding anything interesting anymore. They're going to go on their phone, and then teachers are going to get frustrated. They don't have control over them. There's a lot of behaviors happening, because why is behaviors coming up? Because they're not interested. Until we provide an interesting atmosphere and environment for them and connect them, as I told you, like, notice them. Every students need to be noticed. It doesn't, like, I wasn't noticed for years. I was invisible. I was there. My body was there. I was young. Nobody noticed me. They left me without talking. They could have even asked me a question. I would have said something to them with broken English.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How was your weekend? Well, and at that point, if you ask and the person doesn't respond, then that should be like an additional red flag, And so, if
connection.
And if one of the things that we're doing is trying to provide, say, something more current, more relevant, and all the rest, like, to you, is the desired outcome more aligned with like skill attainment or like job or career preparation? Is this just about like, fulfillment of a person's potential? Like, should we be trying to get kids just learn as much as they can about as many things as they can because learning is good? Or are we trying to prepare them with specific skill sets? Like, and I ask this especially because I think as an English teacher, I can be like, well, it's a little bit of all of it, because we read the literature, but then we do the mechanical, like the grammar piece. And a lot of the people who I know who teach math, sort of run the extremes. It's either very much like a skills based, like we're doing this job training, or you get the philosophical speech of math is the language of the universe and this is how you understand everything. And I don't know a lot of math teachers who sit in the middle and sort of try to talk about both. When you think about what the students are going to accomplish, or what your ideal graduate is going to be doing, to you, what's the guiding principle? Is this learn as much as you can, or are we really thinking about job preparation, career, etc.?
Yes, definitely, because in order to survive, they have to have that. But you can't push knowledge at someone if they don't want it.
Right.
If they don't want it, you're not going to push it to them and give it to them. And that's what we're doing. We're pushing as much as in there as possible through curriculums, right? And it's not working. It's not working. And kids are falling behind, and we're not letting them catch up. And it's like this race we're on. Let's get to grade 9. Let's get to grade 10. Let's get to grade 12. I get kids in grade 12 who don't know their times table. I mean, I'm not saying, people say don't memorize stuff. Yeah, don't memorize it. But if you're lacking like the foundation of math, faster, if you don't have that recall, You
Right.
can apply it. You have to go to your calculator for 9 times 9 every time. You can solve sine law and cosine law because
Right.
you need power, right? Working memory power. You don't have enough working. Like it's like a computer. It's not going to work. It's going to be slow. Everything is going to slow down. But then we put them through this testing and time testing, right? Okay, now my processors are slow and I got to be tested. So what are we setting our kids up for?
Yeah.
To
That's,
fail.
I'm actually really glad you mentioned that. That was, I had this as like a side note of something. I was like, I don't even know if we'll get to it, but just, I stumbled upon a really interesting like Twitter debate a few days back. And an English teacher had posted something about like, he was basically asking the question, like, I hear people saying you don't need to memorize multiplication tables anymore. But his question was basically like, why not? Like, it seems really useful. And there were a lot of people, there were a ton of responses. They were like, you should absolutely learn them. It's a foundational piece so that you can learn these other things or do whatever. But then there was like a really intense pushback, and people were saying, like, we have technology that can do it for you, and you have this, you have that. And I'm like, I don't know if I buy it. Like, I agree, we don't need to just memorize everything, but some things like you just need to know. It's like when you learn to read, you need to learn some sight words. There needs to be some words I just look at it and I know it. I don't have to sound it out. I don't have to think about it. And by having those, you then build the confidence and the fluency that actually lets you read well. And so in my mind, something like the multiplication tables is a foundational piece. And you can't maybe unlock the rest of it. And you made the point about like trying to speed through. Like I said, I have a lot of students who are juniors and seniors, and they're in AP English classes, and they're in, AP Calc, AB, BC. I've got kids who I don't even know, multivariable, I guess, comes after that. And then I don't even know if there's a math after that like kids can take in school, but I have students who are doing it. And then I hand back, oh, hey, a little vocab quiz or something. And they're doing the math on a calculator for like, they got 18 out of 20 and they don't know the percentage. And I'm like, you shouldn't have to even think about it. And they're like, what? And I'm like, that's not a thing you think about. Like, that's a simple number. You should just know it. And they're like, yeah, but, and then they'll throw out something from calculus. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But the number of times in your life you're going to run into 18 out of 20 and have to do it is way more frequent than whatever you just threw at me. I'm not saying you don't know more about math. I'm just saying that if you can't do those little things quickly and accurately, I don't know that we're providing you the foundational skills that are really going to help you on a daily basis, or, make it easier to learn those other pieces, but a lot of these kids get sped through, they start algebra 1 in 6th grade or 7th grade. And it's almost like it's a race to see how far can you get in math before you graduate, without any consideration that like might be okay to take the same math class 2 years in a row just to make sure you're really good at it. English class is almost the same thing every year. It's just different books, and I don't know why we think about math differently. Do you think that there's another way to structure that, like without restructuring all of school and how we schedule it? Do you think there's a way to make that modification so that the end goal is no longer how many math classes can you get through, and maybe it's just how good can you get at the ones that are most valuable to you? Like, is that a thing that's even possible?
Yeah, I mean, in my perfect world, I would like to have IEP for all the students.
Okay.
Educational plan for every student.
Yeah.
Because then you're treating them all equally. And everybody has their own weaknesses and strengths. And that's what education plan is. If we have that, we can discover their interests, what they want to do, what they like to do, and then keep updating that plan along the way through their education.
Right.
And then see where it takes them. And then because you're assessing them all the time, reassessing them all the time, and they're part of it, you do it as a team effort in the school, everybody has one, because we're all individual, right? Don't just do it for someone who's, if you notice their special needs, you're then separating them too. Why don't we all get one?
Yeah.
If they had done it on me, I'm just going back, they would have noticed that this girl doesn't speak.
Right. Right. if they would take, an hour in the entire school year to have like a 1 hour meeting about you, 1 hour about each kid, you could probably do it even less than that.
You can tell. So if somebody have caught that little thing for me, I wouldn't have had a lot of struggles I had. And that's what we're doing to a lot of the students.
Right. Yeah. And even to use that and say, okay, so this kid has an interest in, cooking, wants to be a chef, or, go to culinary arts school after high school, whatever. Then like, we can all then like take our foot off the gas pedal a little bit and be like, okay, so getting to BC calculus is not the most important thing. maybe we can do some additional arithmetic or, some algebraic, thinking skills, because you are going to use that, and so that it's an interesting idea, and it seems obvious to me, like now. I like when I was in school, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and that's one of, I think, only, I don't know what the number is anymore. It used to be only 14 states in the United States required that you do an IEP for students who test in the gifted ranges. So they basically say anyone who falls more than, I think it's 2 standard deviations from your norm, you get an IEP. And so whether that's you have a specific learning disability or you're learning stuff faster than your peers, you get that plan. And so I grew up and I took it for granted. And mine did, it didn't really do anything for me. It was just like, if I finished my work early, I was allowed to leave and go to a resource room. Just like I had other stuff I could go work on. And it was cool though, because otherwise I would have been sitting in that room causing trouble because I was done and I was waiting. So it just, that was functional. And then I forget, I think it was maybe like episode 60 of this podcast. It was around there, 60, 61 with Citizen Stewart. We were talking about school choice. And when I asked him about like what he thought would be ideal, that was actually one of the first things he said, was that every student should have an IEP, because right now we're trying to, force all these kids through the same program and the same list of classes without any consideration that they're all very different. And we actually have the resources to be able to vary their schedules or vary, some of these things. I thought, like, it seems so obvious. And you're the second person in my entire life who said it. He was the first, and then you, and how is that not something that we're acting on? So
it would also make the job of teachers so much more easier, because a lot of time the unnoticed kids that cause problem, because either some of them are gifted and they have IEP, or the lower, the special needs kids also have IEP, but the middle ones, they don't have it, but nobody noticed them. Then they become the troublemaker or whatever is causing. And then the teacher ends up just fixing the behavior in the classrooms, right? But if everybody has it, the teacher's job would be just delivering according to it, right? And we could have smaller sizes of classes. We can have individual education. That's what we need. I don't think in the future kids are going to learn in a mass school system, like a mass class. So it's no longer possible.
I think you already answered the question, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case you want to, because I mean, the idea of the IEP for each student, the individualization of the program studies, and even knowing each student's individual needs, all of that lines up with what a better and maybe ideal school would be. And so I ask every guest, if you were given the opportunity to run a school, what would your school be? Like, think private school, you have a budget, you have a student body, but you can do anything. You can go to the forest, you can sit them down and lecture them all day. Like, we got the IEP piece, we've got some of that individualized attention, but if you could design your own school, what kind of education would you deliver? Like, what would your school look like?
Okay. The first thing is also we would have coaches, not teachers, delivering. I will have them trained as coaches.
How do you differentiate between the two? Like, because
a coach is someone who works at an individual level with the students. We have connections. We work as a team. We're not student. We're like, our relationship is like this. We see like that. We're both people who are involved in a process that we are working together, and I'm guiding them. I'm a mentor to them, right? Whereas teachers to deliver, in my opinion, when I was a teacher, I was just to deliver, and my student was to listen. There are a lot of teachers who do deliver what I'm talking about as well. They're the exceptional teachers who see the student as a person rather than just another student on another desk, right?
Right. Yeah, like we're working together on this. We have different roles, but with the same goals. We're all doing this together. So redefining the teacher as the coach would be a piece. How does that change like the daily experience for a student then? So in the class, everybody will have IEPs. The teacher will have individualized lessons for them, and maybe it will be a smaller class because big 25 kids in a class would not make sense. So it would be not like structured, like you have to do this now and this now. They have to do certain number of things in a day according to their interest and how they have built their plan for this semester. And then that gets broken down into what we're going to do in a daily basis. And then we can have a schedule like that. And the student gets to design it, and the teacher just foresees it and there to guide them. They could come and ask them. So teacher doesn't have to stand in the front of the classroom
throwing information at students.
Right.
Right. And then stand there thinking that they're going to catch it, because that's what we're doing, right? We're teaching to the middle, trying to see if everybody will get it, right? So this way, that we have to make the students want to learn, right? They will want to learn if you give them this responsibility. It's your education. You have to become a learner. You're here to learn. What do you want to learn? Why do you want to learn this?
Yeah. And instead of packing them all on the bus and taking them to their education, it's like give each kid a set of keys and be like, where are you driving it today? I really like the way you describe the individualized piece, because I balk at the idea of like, UDL and universal design to learn and all the different ways that people try to individualize instruction, for the simple reason that I'm like, I can't keep track of 25, or even in a smaller class, I can't keep track of 20 different kids doing 20 different things. And even if I can't keep track of that, I can't design it all, right? Like I can't be in a position where I'm writing 20 different lesson plans. I'll never have time to do anything. I can't communicate. I can't send emails. I'm never going to build a relationship because I'm constantly just working on this stuff. If you put students and maybe their parents, and an advisor in that role where like, we're going to design this thing, this is what we want to do, I could absolutely facilitate. And that's one of the things I find frustrating as a classroom teacher, is that I sort of get simultaneously from, upper administration and the people who are in leadership positions in the school division. They talk about wanting the individualized piece. They want to do the project-based learning. They want students to do the things they feel, motivated about, interested in, and the teacher's going to act as this facilitator. But I simultaneously have this curriculum that has a certain number of things that we're supposed to get done. I have a rule about a certain number of things that has to be in the grade book. I teach 11th grade, and in the state I'm in Virginia, the only English standardized tests they take in high school, they take 2, a writing and a reading test, both in my class. And so you can't, hey, you give me the seniors and tell me, hey, forget about the curriculum, just help them use their literacy and rhetoric skills. I am happy to facilitate. But when you tell me be a facilitator and help them with the individualized pieces while simultaneously saying push through this curriculum and prepare them for the test, like these don't work nicely together. And I'm not saying it's impossible. There are some very good teachers who pull it off. And in total honesty, I am either not that good or I'm not that motivated. But I can't make those two things happen at the same time. And so I think what happens is, for a lot of teachers, that becomes like a defeating situation. I feel like I can't do the facilitation piece because I feel this drive that I have to get through all this curriculum. And then I'm doing the curriculum piece and I'm seeing the desire in the kids to do this, or, I have this interesting idea. And then in the end, because they don't work nicely together, people just sort of give up. And I think that it's a bad place for the teacher to be in, because we see these two goals that don't necessarily agree. But both have value. I don't think that the idea of getting through a strong curriculum is the worst thing in the world, but you can't tell me to do that and tell me to facilitate independent projects and the rest. And that's where, as you point out, smaller class sizes are helpful too. Is this something that, like, do you engage in that format when you're coaching? Like when you're working privately with students, are you doing some of these things with like letting them design some of the goals and what you're going to work on? How does that work?
I have students who are, from unschooling, homeschooling. Those are areas that this can happen really well, right? Because there is no curriculum, right? Although curriculum is really important, but if a student falls behind, a curriculum becomes a problem. And it becomes a problem for the teacher as well, because now she or he needs to push through this curriculum when half of the class is like 2 years behind. How fair is that for the teacher, and how fair is that for the students? They're both lost. And that's what we're creating. Again and again, it happens. And with COVID, it didn't do anything good either. The kids are like, nowadays, when I see my students this year, I see a huge gap. Like the gap has expanded massively since 2020. Right. And we haven't done anything. We haven't done nothing to them. We're just telling them to write exams again. Right. How is that fair? And how can a teacher prepare that? How can they prepare them for exams and tests and pass through curriculum? So we have curriculum to prove that we've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gotten through. We got the checks, we clicked.
Well, and I mean, if you think about it, how all this gets, this gets passed, say like through a state legislature, and they say this is what we're going to do, and most of those people aren't educators, so while they're getting input from your state board of education and things like that, in the end, you have people who are responsible for passing the laws to say, what do the kids have to do in these classes, and they need to get reelected. And so they need to be able to point it like, look, something happened, here's our scores, whatever. And I think that not that it's bad to have public representation that way, but I think that that's really problematic, because the people who need you to check all of the boxes are not the students. It's somebody else, 2 hours away, who needs you to check the boxes so that it looks like you did your job, and then that way it looks like they did theirs. But that maybe isn't the most productive way to do this.
So the two people that are struggling, is the teachers and the students.
Yeah.
And then parents get upset at the teacher then, right? Because you're not doing your job. How can they do the job? Because if you have 25 and 20 of them are lost, how can you help individually? You can't.
Yeah.
And some of these losses are 2 years of loss of math, and that's big. That's huge.
Yeah. And it is a place where, again, there's online resources and all the rest, but not every kid's going to have the motivation, the drive to do that on their own. When the pandemic hit, I was like, I'll be honest, guys, if you just read some books, like it looks like for a couple months, nobody's going anywhere. You should all read some books and you'll probably be fine. But by the time they get to me, they're 16, 17, and 18 years old, and read some books, and, you're probably going to fill in most of those gaps. Math isn't going to come quite the same way, because you're learning new concepts. In English, I mean, you learn some new concepts, but a lot of it's really about building and improving on those same skills. You may create more of a gap there, or certainly when we compare back to curriculum, if the kid only got 50% of the curriculum because things got cut down working online or whatever, then you're 50%, behind on the curriculum. And it's a tough thing to think about, because we do a lot of social promotion. You don't want to hold a kid back because they, fail the unit. I've talked about this for years. I said, I wish instead of doing like 4 marking periods, I wish we would split the year into like 10 or 12 parts, just like little 2-week units or whatever. And if a kid doesn't do well on one, you just redo it. You're 2 weeks behind. You could take 2 English classes at the same time for 2 weeks and you're good. We don't hold you a whole year back and increase the chances that you drop out in the rest, but it would require a high degree of flexibility. We'd have to change the way we schedule it all and say, okay, well, you didn't do this one so well, so we're going to let you do that one again. It's only 2 weeks. It's 3 weeks. It's not the end of the world. When it's a whole year of the kid's life, no one wants to hold them back. But if we're really serious about conveying the knowledge and providing these skills, if you don't have them, why should we promote you? Why should we move you through that? And so something that's a little more individualized and certainly in smaller classes would help. How much of your current work in coaching and tutoring is related to that? Like, have you seen a boom in business because of like the concept of learning loss and parents being concerned?
Oh, yes. I was busy. Last year I would probably say my busiest year ever in my life.
Right.
That's why I decided to even start certification this year, because there's a huge need, and it's never going to go away, because, the tragedy is that the universities never changed their entrance requirement. Although we had a huge worldwide pandemic, we're still asking the kids to come with the same grades.
Yeah.
How fair is that? Why aren't we changing that? Why isn't that coming down? Why aren't we giving them a break? Like the grade 12 students who lost all this, how are they going to do in calculus 1, 2, and 3? Fail.
Right.
That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, or they're going to pay a bunch of money to be sitting in a remedial class that, I mean,
it's setting them up for failure.
And that's where, I did a couple of episodes, in the first month or two of the pandemic. And I talked about how this is like this amazing opportunity, because we're going to need to respond. And this is our chance to individualize some things, to update the way we schedule classes and the curriculum and all the rest. And I said, and if we end up in a place where all everybody wants is just to get back to normal as fast as we can, we'll have missed an amazing opportunity. And we're far enough along now where we missed an amazing opportunity. Like, people are desperately just trying to get it back to normal. And I keep saying, like, normal wasn't that great in the first place. I'm not saying it maybe wasn't better than what happened for a year and a half during a pandemic, but it wasn't as good as it could be. And you just had the chance to make it better. And instead we just went back to it. And I think like that's not good. I mean, if you're in the business of tutoring and coaching and the rest, I also got a lot of emails. I got a lot of requests. People like, I don't know what to do. My kid needs help, whatever. And I had to hit a point where I said, well, I only have so many hours in the day that, I'm comfortable doing this. But I also think that once people recognize the function of having a private teacher, and whether that's for one subject or maybe it's life coach style, it's just someone you meet with once or twice a week and you go over whatever personal stuff, school stuff, and I know some people who did like the pods where it's 5 kids in a neighborhood and they basically hired a private teacher to do all of it. I think now that more people are aware that exists and that it works, and that in some cases it's maybe more accessible than people thought before, I don't think that's going to go away. I think that people see, oh, you know what, I can afford a few extra bucks a week to help my kid gain these skills, or I can pull together with a few of the neighbors and we can do this. In terms of your program where you're doing the MathCodes certification, how does that sort of factor in to providing, say, the same quality services, that you're already providing through MathCodes? What does this do though to help, say, scale that out, to provide those services to more people? Is that what you're trying to do in terms of like bringing people in through a certification?
Yes, I want to basically create, someone who can provide the same service that MathCodes has, and also, use the methodology for coaching that I have developed, and how I merge those coaching methodology with the math hacks and simplification that I've created over since I was 13 to this day, and it's never going to end. I'll always be creating those, because every time I learn with my students, I get, oh, I can create another one. My students are my teachers. They have been my, that's where I explore and create these with them, because every time it gets modified or becomes customized for that type of learner or that type of learner, right? So there are different ways that I approach each learners as well when I'm teaching math. It's not one way that's going to work. So I want to teach all of those things to the people that are going to go through the certification. Only the requirement is that they should have knowledge of math and a foundation of math and passion for teaching. Right. And I will provide them everything that needs in the certification. And after that, the idea is for them to have their own independent coaching business, right, where they can take in students and work online. And I actually started working online about 5 years ago, turned all my business from, seeing in person, and even I had my office at that time. So I converted all to online. So when COVID hit, I was like fully.
Yeah, you're ready to go. Yeah. I know a guy who does a lot of interesting stuff with, it's experimental school is not the right way to phrase it, but he works with Teach for America. I forget the name of the program, but they're basically like reinventing kind of the concept of school. And that was something he said. He goes, when the pandemic hit, he goes, I got a lot of phone calls because one of the last projects I was working on was all online. He goes, so we kind of already figured out how to do this. And when all of a sudden everybody shut down and had to go online, he's like, no one knew what to do. And he was like, aha, I got this one. Like, we're ready. I mean, for me, I made the shift online in school, which then of course meant, well, I'm not tutoring at the public library or meeting at a student's house. So I went online too. I'm now completely online. Like my school division opened an all online distance learning program that is, hopefully permanent. So I'm staying online for regular teaching, but my tutoring's there. Even if I were to go back into the classroom during the day teaching, I don't think I would ever go back to in-person tutoring, just because the ease it provides. I can help more students. I'm not limited by geography, and I don't waste the time driving back and forth, or, it streamlines that whole process in some really interesting ways. And for you, thinking about how you can provide training and certification to other tutors and coaches, it also gives you the ability to reach them. And then in turn, they then have the ability to reach even more students. Yeah, I certainly haven't done anything about it, but I've had that thought before, because my bread and butter for tutoring is college admissions essays. And sometimes I get more requests than I have time for. So I have a few people who I know and they're good. And so I refer them over. And I always feel like, I'm like, man, I would love to just have the opportunity to grab like a couple of young teachers and train them on how to do this. And then when I'm giving the referrals, give it to someone who's going to essentially approach it the same way I do. There are plenty of ways to do it. I'm sure some of the other ones are great. I've had a lot of success. The students are always happy. And I'm like, man, yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm not nearly as organized as you are to put it all together. How long has this been in the works? You said you moved online 5 years ago and you've been creating these materials as you work with students. At what point did you sort of have the idea about going from working with students to also working with other coaches?
Yes, I have trained other coaches in the past. About 2 years ago, we started this with my husband's help. He's a film producer. He truly believes in the necessary for math education, and he's really values it. So he came on board with me, and he helps me with a lot of marketing and all the other stuff. He's the person there, because I'm not that great with that stuff.
Right.
But I take care of the delivery and everything else on this end, which is perfect. So we have a good team atmosphere like that. But we did that 2 years ago. What happened was, with MathCodes, there are, as you said, there are a lot of ways to teach it, but I have simplified math to the point that even with the phrases I say, it's the phrases that will stick in the brains of the child. That's how I've gone down to.
Right.
Like the way you say it, it will stick like a glue, and the next time it becomes a song, and the kid is enjoying and doing the math rather than like, oh, this is again here.
Yeah.
So I make it fun. I have so many different ways of bringing math to life, because as I said, at that point when I started doing this hacking and all this, I was at a difficult place, right? For me,
Right.
It was like a world of escape. I humanize math. Every day I talk about it's him, her, here, we're doing this, we're doing that,
Right.
We're going to do this, we're going to do that, right? So to bring math to life, I know a lot of people can teach it in many different ways, but I believe that it is to the point. MathCodes, it's simplified and demystified math, and I want to share that with other people. They could bring in their expertise and use MathCodes along with it, and the coaching techniques that I have developed, which have also been so successful. I can get someone who hates math to love it.
Yeah.
Like I just, it's like magic. It happens. It just happens because there's so many components to it. It just happens. And so therefore it's a gift that I got at that time of my life. It came to me. I want to share that. And I want to have a standard. I don't want to just people to take it and not kind of, sometimes, in marketing, you have to be very careful. You give something, if people are not the same way as you're thinking, they might use the title as a coach and not provide the standard that you've created. It's important who you
you need some quality assurance. Yeah, you need a way to check in.
So that's how the certification came into play. I want them to believe that this is a unique way of teaching math. I want them to see that. I want them to keep that standard with the students and create that transformation for the students as well.
Yeah, no, and it's great. And I love the idea. And I think that there's like a degree of confidence that comes with that mindset that, like, I'm sure, it's the same thing I said. I'm sure there are other great ways to do this. It's not the only way, but it works well. And I believe in it. And so when I think about, say for me working in the classroom, when the whole school division, all of a sudden we have, say, new curriculum, or we're going to work through some common units. That's something they've been working on, because we've got a lot of high schools in our county, and they want kids at the different schools to have an approximately similar experience. It shouldn't be wildly better or worse, or reading entirely different books. And I get that, especially from the perspective of an administrator. But I also feel like sometimes I'm in and sometimes I push back a little bit. And I always feel like if I was my own boss, like I would want me to argue a little bit, because if you can find a person who's teaching, tutoring, coaching, and you say, hey, let's do it a new way, and they don't resist because they think their way is better, then what were they doing all along? Like, a big part of leading people, whether that's as a coach, as a teacher, et cetera, is having confidence in what you're doing and believing that it's a good way to do it. Now, when someone resists change because it's just easy to stick with what I got, or, I don't want to learn something new, I don't have any patience for that. But when someone has the genuine belief what I'm doing works better, and they have results to back it up, like, that's what we should want. You should want everyone to teach the way you teach, you know, because that means you believe in it and it's working. If you say, well, I don't think anybody else needs to do what I'm doing at all, like, I feel like you should be more confident in what you're doing. You should believe that anyone else can have the same impact you're having if they duplicate or reproduce some of those strategies. Sometimes this has to do with just a second ago when you were talking, you got very animated. You were like excited about it, right? That's not something that you can teach someone else, and so you can teach them these are the terms we're going to use, or this is how we're going to simplify this problem. I can teach you the mechanical piece. I can't teach someone to be charismatic. You could try, but in the end, you can usually tell when someone's faking enthusiasm versus they're enthusiastic. How important is that for you? Because like I think about myself, I'm like, I'm 30% salesman. I'm 30% teacher, and I'm 30% like counselor or something, and then there's just the random other mix that hits the 10%. But a big part of what I'm doing is I'm selling this thing, and I have to be enthusiastic, and that's how it goes. I don't know if that's something that works for everyone. How important is that personality piece, especially when working one-on-one and in small groups? Like, is that something that you include as part of when you're coaching the coaches? Do you approach that personal piece like, this, here's where you have to get excited, or this one isn't going to fly? Like, do you have that kind of piece built in, or do you just trust that individuals will figure it out?
I also coach them in the training to how, like, it's like setting intentions, right? When you're with the student, what is your intention with that child, right? And you're online, and everybody thinks that online is like hard, in person is better. It's the opposite. Like if I was to, you and I are talking, and you see how connected we are, right? Mm-hmm. If I do this, I lost connection with you, right? If I turn away, right? It's simple turning away. You got your kids hooked up to you like this all the time. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. Even if they pick up their phone, they're picking up their phone. I have students sometimes multitask on other screens. I can pick it up like this. I'm like, switch it off. Switch it off.
I had kids working on something today. It's a small class, they're working. I'm like, hey, I'm not putting you in the lockdown browser. It's more trouble than it's worth. I'm like, but you can't look this up. I told him, like, just do it. If you don't do it well, I'll let you redo it, but do it honestly. And at one point I saw a kid's eyes like creeping over, and I didn't say anything, and he went back, and then I look, and he's like reading from another screen. I was like, like, no, I have the same ability. Like, it's the same way when a kid sneaks their phone in the classroom. If you're really watching, you're paying attention, it can work.
So over the years of working online, that's also something that I have a lot of experience in delivering this over this medium versus, in person. So that's something else that I will be training them. But I think more than anything else is, there are some people that not going to have the personality, but I have a contagious personality where I get excited about teaching math. Like when I'm doing it with the kids, they're always laughing. Like, when someone's happy, learning is so easy, that if you get them to the state of happiness, then everything else they want to accept what you're saying, because you're now in a fun relationship, you're exchanging information, right? So I will be coaching them on that as well in my certification. But as you say, some people might not get to the level, but that's where they're going to we have ongoing support for them. That's where if that's one of their issues, that's where I will be also helping them to, get to a level. I mean, it's not over one day. It just, you work at it, right? It's like anything else.
Yeah. And it's probably easier to teach the technical skills than it is to teach the enthusiasm and say the personal piece. How do you form that relationship with students? But you can't coach it up. You can certainly help people with that. And I think for a lot of people, especially working, one-on-one, I know in my tutoring, I get very good reviews from clients. I do little or no advertising. It's all word of mouth. And that's usually the thing that one parent will tell another parent. And the thing that I hear is, so-and-so's kid loved it and they liked working with you. We get good results. And so I'm sure if I didn't, they wouldn't be, asking. But it's not just that, hey, we got a good test score, we got into this college or whatever. It's that the kid didn't hate it. And in some cases actually looked forward to the meeting each week. That's a big deal. And not only is it better for the student, it's way better for me. Like if the kid's miserable, then it's hard for me to stay excited, like everyone benefits from finding a way to keep it engaging.
And kids feed off your fear, your happiness, like students. That's why, like, a lot of the time, if a teacher is not quite good in math and they become a teacher in a classroom, their fear, even though they may be standing up in front of the class teaching, but that internal fear goes out because it's all energy, right? They receive it, they know, and that fear induces onto them. Now they're fearful of math as well. That's why, with funding cutting and stuff like that, we have like gym teachers teaching. It's not their fault. They get to teach a math class, but they don't have all that knowledge and expertise to teach something. Like, sometimes we have in Canada, like grade 10 PE teacher will be teaching grade 10 math.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, in that, I'm sure there's a lot of ways to handle it. I feel like if I'm in that situation, that's a good time, especially with the older students, to like just be honest. Like, all right, so look, you need to get this stuff done and I'm going to help you do it. But I also should let you know I don't know all of it. So we're going to have to do this. And just by being honest sometimes creates enough of like an open communication that the kids buy in. And, not to say the PE teacher's going to pull off a great class, but you might get through it just by letting them like be honest about it. When people try to mask those weaknesses, you're standing in front of a classroom of kids and there's something you don't know and you try to hide it, like they smell fear like bees, like it's in the room and they know it. And so it's usually better to be honest in those moments. We always want to be prepared. We always want to know what we're doing, but we also have to recognize it's a very human interaction, and you're eventually going to hit a point where you don't know the answer, you don't know how to do something. And in my personal opinion, faking it is usually the wrong thing to do. Like it's okay to say sometimes I don't know, because that also humanizes it for the students. There's plenty they don't know. And when they see that you can admit it, then they don't feel bad the next time they don't know something and need to ask for help. And so you have to sort of be even in that transaction. I have a question. We kind of touched on this, but I'm just curious, for your own formal education, after high school, did you study math in college? Like, were you formally trained as a teacher initially? Like, is that sort of how this path started for you? Or like, what did you do after high school that led you to this career?
I did undergraduate because I also thought toward the end, I was thinking I could become a doctor because that was what my dad wanted me to be. Internally, I wanted to be a teacher, or I wanted to have somewhere I could help and show and share everybody what I, the hacks and everything that I developed in my head. But my dad was he was very abusive. So I was just, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. I'll go and take all this stuff. Yes, right. So I have a lot of background and psychology, and, that's what I studied. Math is not something I really got out of in college or university. But when I took calculus and stuff, of course I have to hack them too. So I started, enjoying in that way. And then I got married and I had to, slow down my education for a bit. That's why I became a teacher assistant.
Okay.
And I became a behavioral interventionist, and I started working with special needs students. And that's when I discovered a lot more things. And I'm so glad it happened, because when I was, if I just worked with, what we call normal students, I wouldn't have developed to this deep what I have right now. Because when I went to work with someone with autism or ADHD, whatever I had to even developed even deeper for them to understand, break it down into more and more steps. Then what I did is I started using the same thing with other students who are labeled normal, and it worked like magic. And then I'm like, why aren't we teaching them the same way?
That was something that we were doing a training at the beginning of the year. We're launching the new distance learning program, and they had was it the adaptive technology specialist come in, and he basically points out to like all these tools and resources that we have. And, generally speaking, nothing's perfect, but we're for the most part a well-funded school system. And so he's pointing to all these apps and all these programs, all these things we can use. And it's all, special education services or something specific. And somebody asked her, like, so what are we all supposed to do with this? And he goes, well, here's the thing. It works for everyone. And so, and then he points to like 10 different things that we do in the classroom now that we just accept as like, that's a normal part of class. And he's like, every one of these things I just listed started out as something that was used as a specific intervention in special education. And over time, we realized it wasn't just this one kid who needs it. It works for most of the kids. And so everything sort of trends that way. And so we basically got this presentation on all these like sort of great tools to use. And the point of it was to use it with everyone, particularly since you're working online. And I thought about it. I was like, that's good, you know? And again, it's one of those things that seems obvious. Like, I always feel like that's the real stroke of genius, is when someone says something that you're like, that's a great idea. And then you can't believe you didn't think of it first, like, because it seems so. And he said that, and I was like, of course, you know? And so having that background, particularly where you're going to be able to work with students, you know, in small groups or one-on-one, certainly is going to create, you know, a great sort of opportunity to build your own techniques and styles, and then eventually translate that into coaching and working privately one-on-one. I guess the question about that is like, at what point did you decide that coaching and tutoring was your path? Like, how did you decide, like, that's where I'm going with this, that's the piece I'm sticking with?
I always done tutoring. Right after high school, I started tutoring. I was tutoring, and it kind of came to me by accident, because at the time I got married, and my stepdaughters, I started helping them, and they would go to school and get great results, and they were very confident in math, and their friends see them so confident, so they started asking. That's how I started first tutoring. From there, they brought me the kids.
Right. Go out and find me some new clients.
So that's how it started. So I always had a tutoring business on the side. But as I went through the school system and being a teacher assistant, standing behind the class, in the back of the classroom, seeing how some teachers are teaching and seeing the interactions with them, then I've working with those, the unique learners that I had the opportunity to work with, had the whole days, the 5 days a week to work with, just made everything that I had and what I was going to do into more and more clear, that this is what I wanted to do. I want to help them in my own, I wanted to create this right environment where I can give them the right instructions. For me at school, I was in the wrong environment, giving almost the wrong instructions to people.
Right.
And when I got to the point of, getting my teacher degree and everything, I was sort of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Right. This is not a right environment. I've already know all of this. I've already seen all of this. And this place is failing a lot of people. And I don't want to be part of that equation.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's powerful transformation. Good friend of mine, Jim Dunning, who has been on the podcast. I think he's the only person who's been on more than once, but that he's a teacher's assistant. And so as a result, he's in a lot of different classes. He does a lot of math work. He's a brilliant guy, but he's always sort of there in the role of like the other adult in the room. And I mean, no offense to anyone he works with some really great teachers, but Jim's a guy who he's one of, or the smartest person in the room in most of the places he goes. And so he has these really interesting observations, because he sees all these different people teaching, and he's sort of hanging out watching for a little bit, and then he's working with these kids, and he does great tutoring work and all this, but that he's sort of come to that conclusion, and that's why that's a big part of the conversations on this podcast, is like, what can we do better? And the answer is, almost all of it. And then, how do we do it? Or, why do we do it? And his whole thing is, we're failing a lot of people, and this isn't great. And I said, why don't you quit if you're in this corrupted system? He goes, well, somebody's got to do something right around here, like, and it's like, it's good, and I'm glad he does stick it out, but he has a very similar experience to what you just described, and being in that role of observing and then working with the kids in one-on-one and small group settings. I think for a lot of people makes it clear how the larger class is not working, for a lot of people. So, all right. So we're going to get ready to wrap this up here in a minute. I have two questions that I usually ask everyone as we're wrapping up. The first is essentially open mic. So if there's anything that you feel like we didn't talk enough about, or something that you wanted to hit on that maybe we moved past too fast or something like that, anything, and you can tell us a little bit more about the program you're promoting if you like, and then we'll do recommendations for some books and movies, and that can be, you know, academic or can just be just for fun. That's a little personality piece, and we'll wrap it up. But first, for the open mic, is there anything that we didn't hit on that you wanted to, or that you would like to just give an extra couple of minutes attention to?
Yes, I would like to say that I think you asked me about how do you bring this personality out, right? Earlier about, you know, you have certain animations or you have to do, and what if they're not like that? So here's the thing. I think we can all get to that level, but it's because when you're working at school, your creativity gets sucked out. And you're working at school on someone else's term. Your innovation and your mind is at a place of not to create and not to enjoy what you're doing, right? That's how the status of a lot of teachers are right now. They're just feeling stuck and frustrated. So when you're in this environment, when you create this environment that I'm talking about, that I've created and you've created too, and through coaching, I'm in control. I have every way to create whatever I want on the other side for my student. I have it. I have the power. It's like I have this, that's what I wanted all the time when I was in those environments, feeling like I was racing or I was forced to deliver this curriculum and check the things off. Here, I have everything in my power. Why wouldn't I be happy to animate and enjoy and have fun and, you know, play and get excited? You have everything because you're leading a life fulfilled. Your passion that you had this passion to teach kids, create future for them, it's in your hand. It's going to come naturally, and you're rested. You're not working over your time. It's your business. You're going to feel that, and you're going to deliver that, and that's how it's like it's a cycle. They feed you deliver, it feeds back and forth. It's a beautiful place to be. So it's not like it doesn't suck up your creativity. I'm more creative than ever in my life.
It's good. And I agree. I think that's I did an episode I don't remember what number it was. It was a few weeks back. It's probably episode 72, 73. And I called it, and I probably mistitled it, right? But I had people like commenting on things. I'm like, that's not even what I talked about. I'm like, you're just responding to the title. But I said basically like, don't dummy proof teaching. And I think that sometimes what we do is, because we can't get enough teachers, or we worry about the quality of teachers, we create a curriculum that almost any moron can sort of work through, at least at a basic functional level. And that's fine to bring the bottom up. The problem is when you have people who are talented and who are passionate and who are great teachers, you're also sort of handcuffing them to that, and you're sort of bringing them down. And I think that that's where a lot of people get frustrated. And like I said, I think that when someone says you have to do it this way, if you're serious about what you do and you're good at it, you should resist that a little bit. Not that you don't want to learn a new trick, but when someone says you have to do exactly this thing this way, like, yeah, but I'm doing a thing that's better than that. And if you don't feel the drive to push back, I would argue that you're not feeling as creative and, motivated and certainly not as empowered as we want our teachers to be. And so you're right. Having that opportunity to kind of work for yourself and to focus in on those individual students and those individual goals really reduces a lot of the things that make teaching stressful. I think I am the only times I'm ever stressed about tutoring is when I overextend myself a little bit and I have a busier week than I really wanted. But I did that to myself. Like, I don't even get mad. I'm like, well, I should have just said no, or should have scheduled that one 2 weeks out instead of this week. At school, I don't have the luxury of making those decisions. And so it all just piles up, and so I think you're right that the enthusiasm and the personality and those connections with students, I think are easier to create and maintain in the environment you're describing. I think that's absolutely true.
This is the right environment to foster that for both of us. You know? And the one thing that I also want to add is for me, there's a difference between someone being a homework help and someone's tutoring and someone's coaching. So as I passed through those 22 years of doing all of these roles, I now want to educate parents that there's a difference. So parents can't just blindly go and expect a tutor to transform their students in a holistic way, because they don't have time. And that's not what you're sending your kids for. They're there to help them with the current grade and whatever's happening, and fill in some missing gaps if they're able to, and catch if they're experienced enough. But not a lot of teachers, a lot of tutors don't even know that. So they basically work on what is at the surface right now.
Right.
But a coach is not someone like that. We, like the example for me, what I developed is looking at the child in a holistic way. It's not just math that's a problem. Most of the time, it's not even math. That's not why they're not doing their work. That's not why they're struggling. It's more than math.
Right.
You have to figure out what that is. And when you crack that code, you got the kid working.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I just had this conversation with my wife probably four or 5 days ago, where she floated, and I don't like the term like life coach. It's something about it feels cheesy to me, but she said she could hear me talking with the student. She was upstairs, and she's like, a lot of that wasn't even specifically about their writing. Like, she's like, you're talking with a kid about their life, and then you hit a point where all of a sudden they were doing the writing. I was like, I don't know. Yeah, that's what we got. She's like, she's like, you could market this as more than just say like the tutoring or the writing help. She goes, because you did a lot more in that conversation. And I was like, yeah, but that's how you get them to do the writing. And it's exactly what you're describing. But she's like, you should redefine what you do and kind of rebrand that. And that's like, I now, like, you're saying this, I'm like, I feel like you're putting terminology to what she was suggesting, and we just had this conversation. Like, it's interesting coincidence, but yeah. And I mean, and do you think that that's something that parents understand? Like, do you have to educate the parents on, I can help your kid with their homework, or I can tutor them on these skills, or I can coach them up in a whole lot of other ways?
It's a full education is required.
Yeah, but I mean, do parents like understand that and buy in, or do you get people who are like, let's just get their grade up and leave it at that? Like, I mean, what's the reaction from parents?
If they're for that, I send them, say, you should go get a tutor.
Okay, yeah.
But I also honest about telling them your child will not get good grades. I feel like it's my responsibility to educate them. So when I do see them and meet them and I get to know what their situation is, I will honestly tell them that this is my honest opinion to you, is that with the tutor's help, your child's not going to progress. They're way off now. It needs to be required by a coach ability to get them to, and then there's time frame associated with that. It's not just a magic pill I have and here you go, and then it all gets better. It's not like that. So there's a process we got to walk through, and which I will lead that. I will mentor that for your child, and you can be part of the team. So we bring them as a team member as well. It's not just hand over your child and you walk away. The parents are involved in it as well, so that the responsibility is shared. It's not, you need that, right? In order to make that happen. Yeah, very important.
And it's good, again, I think that takes a certain degree of confidence and and maybe a certain amount of sort of status in your career, but to be able to speak honestly and essentially be willing to let clients walk away if they're not interested in this, but I think it's good. And that's something like, the more I learn about what other people are providing in coaching and in tutoring and the rest, I think it's really important to be able to do it, because when someone asks you to do work that isn't what you want to do, or isn't what you're comfortable with, or you don't think it's the best path forward, you don't do your best work. And in the end, you represent yourself poorly because you don't get the results you wanted anyway. And so sometimes, it's not that it has to be my way or the highway, but I have a thing I'm trying to do here that I believe is strongly is going to work for your kid. And if you would like to do something different, more power to you. But I also need to remember that I have the ability to say no. And it might be the best thing for me and the student if that's not the relationship that we're going to have.
I also come from a place of integrity, that if I don't tell you, no one is going to tell you. So if you walk away, I've just let you take your child and put to something to fail. If I can prevent that, you don't need to buy from me. But all I'm saying is that they're way off and their gap is so huge, a tutor won't be able to fix unless the tutor's experienced enough to know all those things and fix in the time you're thinking. If you want to go, that's available. But I just need to tell you.
Yeah, I went before you go spend waste a lot of money somewhere else. This is what I feel like you should know. And those are hard conversations to have, but I agree. I think it's important,
But over these years, they're very appreciative of it.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody loves integrity, right?
Yeah.
It's not that I'm asking them to stay with me.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm saying. It's all I'm saying is that your child, and maybe after 1 year of working with coach, you can turn and go back to a tutor. That would be fine. But they're not ready right now. Yeah. Where they are, what you're looking for is not going to satisfy you or them. And this also happens, right? Parents think that finding a tutor is the result of their, like, that's the solution. Now everything's going to go well. And sometimes it takes a long time for the students to pick up. And they think that now that I got you help, why aren't you doing well? To the student, and then they turn around to the tutor and go, how come I paid you all this money? You haven't done your work either. Like, why are they still doing bad in class?
Yeah.
Right. And then now
there's a process here. Yeah. And I think, it's important to be realistic about it. And that's also when maybe you occasionally run into clients with unrealistic expectations. I think it is okay to point those people in another direction, right? Because in the end, that's not healthy or productive for anyone. And I don't ever, I've had people I've worked with, and I'm like, you paid me a lump sum and I'm gonna refund some of your money because I don't think we should continue with what you're asking me to do. Obviously I would love the money, but if I accept it and do a poor job, that tarnishes my reputation, and none of us feel good about the situation we're in. And that's not good for the student, most importantly, and it's not good for the parent or the tutor and the coach. It's not an easy conversation to have, but I agree with you. I think it's important. And when people know that you're being honest, like when they can sense you're being honest and providing the best information possible, the best advice possible, most people react well. I've had a few who didn't, and that's, it's going to happen. But generally speaking, it's the same thing with your classroom teacher. When the parent believes strongly that you are doing the best you can for their child, they don't argue with you. They don't complain. They're not calling the principal and saying, hey, I don't like this thing they did in class, whatever. Like, if they believe that you have their students' best interest in mind and you're working hard for that, everybody tends to work together better, but you have to have that trust and that confidence, and takes a little while to develop it sometimes, whether that's by reputation or that individual relationship.
Yes. Within our certification, we go through a process. I have systems for each of these over the years. I've gone through a lot of conversations like this. Mm-hmm. So I have put that into the certification as well. And something else that I want to add is, as I started ready to launch this, I have questions from teachers and tutors that what about if I'm not a math teacher? I want to become a coach, right? So we are now in the process of developing what's called student success coach, so that you can just take that certification and you can use it with your own expertise in other
other subject areas,
or just be student success coach,
right?
Because a lot of students don't know how to be students.
That's been there's a growing market for that. There've been a lot of new what do you call it, executive function coaches have popped up around where I work over the last maybe 5 to 8 years. And and there's a market for it. I think if students need that kind of help, what good is knowing how to solve the equation or write the essay if you can't keep track of the assignments and keep yourself organized and focused on the rest. And so, that gets back to that, identify the root cause of the struggle and work with it. And if you know that that's it, maybe you don't need a math tutor or writing tutor. Maybe you need someone who can help with the fundamental organizational, processing skills that make those other things possible. Otherwise, you're right. You're throwing good money on top of bad, paying for a tutor and the skill when maybe that skill wasn't actually the issue. But again, requires a high degree of sort of awareness from the parent and the student sometimes to figure out what that's going to be. And maybe that's where a relationship with a good coach can be helpful. Somebody who can help out and make those observations in a on a one-on-one basis. So, all right. Well, so let's do the books and movies, and we'll wrap this thing up. This can be academic, intellectual, or literally just for fun. I've gotten all kinds of weird lists from people. So whatever makes you happy. But what are a couple of books and a couple of movies that you think listeners might enjoy or learn from, or whatever you like?
I read math textbooks.
Okay. Wake me up when you're done. No.
I am still hacking math. So every time I see a book, I have to really look at it very carefully. They're not textbooks for me because that's just what I learned, right?
Right.
This is what kept me alive through my hard times. So that's part of me. That's just jokes, like,
right,
that's just for fun. That's one thing. And the other thing, that the latest book that I'm reading right now is Atomic Habits, because I think one of the things that that interests me a lot, which I have in my coaching practice, but this just caught my eyes and was recommended by somebody to me as well, as its habits are very important for our students. Mm-hmm. And they're lacking so much of it now because the social media is just like, they're just like absorbing the phone. And even I have a 14-year-old son. So it's like, what habits can we create on a daily basis? Not just with school, just to be a person.
Yeah,
right?
just so good intentional practices. Yeah.
So yeah, very, very important. So I'm reading that. I don't watch TV. I don't at all. I barely. It has never been my thing. I don't.
Yeah.
It could be like, you can call me weird, but I do go to movies.
Yeah.
I do go to movies, and as I said before, my husband is a film producer.
Okay.
So I watch it with him, but it's not something that I would go and say, oh, I'm going to watch this. I don't know why. It never happens to me like that. I find it almost. It's probably comes from my dad always at that time yelling at me unconsciously. I buried in my head, I'm wasting time.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe I have to work on my unconscious mind to let go. You're no longer living with your dad.
It's okay to relax and be entertained for a little bit. Yeah.
But I do love going into the nature. I'm a big fan of the nature. I live in British Columbia, which is a beautiful city with forest after forest after forest. So my peaceful place is the forest and the trees. And meditation. I'm huge on meditation, and I'm an NLP practitioner as well. So these are things I enjoy. I love boating, but TV doesn't grab me.
Yeah, my friends, my best friends all tease me because like they'll talk about TV shows and they're watching sports, and I'm like, I don't watch, like, my kids, we give them, like, I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they get, one show a day is the rule. Like on the weekends, maybe you get a movie or you can watch, but like, we watch a Sesame Street, you can watch Pokemon, but you get one like that, and so we don't have it on a lot. And, but I love playing fantasy sports, and they're like, how are you doing fantasy sports? Like, we're all in the league together. And like, how are you in second place and you haven't watched any of the games? And I'm like, because it's really just a big math problem. And I'm like, I'm an English teacher. I'm like, we're just looking at the numbers and trying to figure out whose numbers are most likely to be good over the next few weeks. And they're like, yeah, but you're not watching them. And I'm like, honestly, I think I'm worse if I'm watching it because I get distracted by what I saw. And this is really just, you win by getting the numbers, And so, yeah, I don't watch a ton either. On a good weekend, I will sneak in a movie, but the kids have taken most of the TV away and kept me busy. Just out of curiosity, do you have? So you say your husband's a film producer. Do you want to throw a word in there to plug one of his movies, or is there one that maybe you like in particular?
He actually works on documentary films.
Okay,
that's what his. This one about Pablo Escobar. He was in Colombia for two and a half months. They were looking for his hidden treasures in Colombia. So that was one of them he did. And then what is that guy's name that he did the motorcycle, the Evel Knievel? Yes, he was part of that, making of that documentary.
Cool.
Yes. Awesome. And then there's another one called Facing. It's about different leaders around the world. They did a documentary on that. So those are some of
his That's works. Good. Yeah, that's on the rare occasion, and that's one, I have to be careful on that topic. So I put on a documentary, and then my wife is either, rolling her eyes or falling asleep, and once in a while we get a good one, but that's when no one else is awake. And on the rare occasion I turn the TV on, that's usually where I end up, either reruns of bad like 90s sitcoms or or watching documentaries. So awesome. All right. So we got Atomic Habits, which actually sounds very good. And so I'll make sure we link that one up. And then a couple of movies in general and from your husband. So good stuff. So
one thing I'll add is I do like watching period pieces. Like I did watch The Crown, like, like the historical stuff. And that's sort of what I'm into. And then I'm excited about the James Bond movie that's coming up.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Big Bond fan here. I watched, we quit at some point, but I watched a bunch of episodes of The Crown with my wife. And I think we reached a point where she was not loving, she's like, all right, the drama's died down a little bit. And I was like, I wish they were all 15 minutes shorter. Like, it's a good show, but we watched a bunch of those, and I actually was surprised how much I liked those. And I had
Have you watched Versailles? I
have not.
It's very nice.
So yeah. All right.
I've watched all of that.
There we go.
So I guess I do watch TV.
Yeah, well, that's when I say I don't watch TV, I'm like, selectively I do. I just, I will never just have the TV on in the background for no reason. Like, once in a while I will find something good, but not, probably not often enough. So all right, before we wrap up, I know that people can track you down at mathcodes.com. But are there any other places, like if people want more information, do you have, aside from mathcodes.com, do you have a website or social media accounts or anything like that you want me to link when I post this up, or places where people could contact you or maybe read a little bit more?
I'm on all social media, on LinkedIn, everywhere. But for the certification, it's MathCodes Certified Coach.com.
Okay, great.
That's the one for that. And mathcodes.com is kind of what I do, and for parents kind of the side.
Right.
But for the certification, we created another page. But we're on all social media, like Facebook. MathCodes is there. I'm personally there, and then LinkedIn, everywhere.
Cool. All right. So I'll link some of that up in case we have anyone who's interested in learning more, whether it's about MathCodes or the MathCodes certification. So this has been the ClassCast podcast. We've been talking with Kohila Sivas about her work with coaching, tutoring, providing math skills, and helping other coaches as well. You can find the ClassCast podcast on all major streaming services, on YouTube, and at www.classcastpodcast.com. Kohila, thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a good one.